Hey guys, Joe Simons here. Before we get into this episode, I need your help with one thing, and that is to go pick your 11 lures for 1 penny. Yes, we are doing an 11 lures, so that means you get to go pick any of our lures, 11 total, for just 1 penny over at 11lures.com. We are doing this because what we found is that every time we give lures out as samples, people keep coming back and buying more of them over and over and over again. So this is our way of putting our best foot forward to get some amazing lures that we know work for redfish and speckled trout and snook and flounder in your hands so that you will come back and buy more. It is first come, first serve over at 11lures.com. That's 11lures.com. So the number 11lures.com. See you over there and enjoy the episode.
In my soul. Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds. Man, pulled it off even though I'm in the midst of COVID right now. Yahoo! Wyatt just got over it. I've got it now. A couple of team members are dealing with it. Fun times, but the show must go on. All right. And speaking of that, the fishing must go on, even when it's cold, even when the fish are finicky. And so that is the topic of this podcast. Luke recently was in Sebastian area, put up a Mondo snug using what, 5-pound braid? You had a couple of these.
Yeah, I switched to 5-pound braid recently, and it was after a trip that Joe and I did that we published a video like a couple weeks ago, and we saw a ton of redfish. It was right after a cold front, and we got into some nice pockets of redfish. They were holding in calm, clear water, and I bet you we saw 50, maybe more than 50, to be honest, and we caught 2. Right, and they're
what's this wee stuff? I don't remember having a mouse in my pocket.
Enough reminiscing. But yeah, we saw all these redfish, and we literally caught 2, and even had some good shots at them. And what I was seeing, I was using 10-pound braid, and I saw it multiple times. Is that there'd be some reds cruising, and it seemed as if they looked natural. They weren't acting weird. I would lead them like casting over them. And ahead of them as well, and they would start spooking off as soon as that line either laid down in the water or as soon as I started reeling, that line started moving. I think they could actually feel the line, and so I was just like, well, I love sight fishing, and I just want to increase my odds. So let me just try some lighter line, some thinner line. I've never used anything lighter than 10-pound braid. So I went to a local store, and they have 5-pound Power Pro, and that was the thinnest line I saw there. So I bought it. And I've used it twice now, 2 different days. And both days I've caught a slot snook up in the super shallow water. And I don't know if I'm now catching big snook in shallow water because they can't feel the line as good as they used to, or if I just have been getting lucky. But so far I've been really happy with it. And again, it's only been 2 trips, so I can't make any big claims, but to be determined.
Yep. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, some other tactics. Richard's even going to talk about some deeper water fishing for these finicky fish. So who wants to kick it off besides Luke's story about using 5-pound braid?
Yeah, I'm going to take the reins on this. So I am also experiencing some really picky fish on the East Coast as well. And in a recent trip, I, like Luke and many of us on here, would prefer to sight fish when possible. Like, I want to make 20 casts in a day and 50% of those casts be fish on the other end of the line. Like, that's to me how I try to approach any area that I fish. Even if the water's dirty, I try to find, something to cast at, either whether it's a silhouette of a fish or a tail or a head wake or a push, something. And I had a trip recently where I was fishing in really, really clear water, and I could see everything, even like 25, 27-inch trout, really good trout that, earlier in 2021, I could sight cast with a power prawn and some Dr. Juice. Really methodically take my time, creep it right in front of them, give it just a little hop, and have a good cat and mouse game. And I might spook 2 or 3, but I'd usually, land 2 or 3 afterwards by putting in the time. And I was unsuccessful. I got 1 redfish and every other red and trout that I tried to play that cat and mouse game with, they had that, that trademark behavior, right? Where they either look at it and then like they spook because they're terrified, or they look at it and then you move it once and they turn to the right and say like, oh, I'm going to act like I didn't see that. Or you're just going to work it past them and they see it and they don't move and they act like, if I don't move, maybe nobody will see me. Maybe the shrimp won't know that I'm sitting right here in this pothole, but they saw that lure. So they have this weird behavior about themselves. And it can be really frustrating because there's times, Luke, where you present it just right and you're like, that should have gotten bit. And you ask yourself, what am I doing wrong? I found the fish. I feel like I'm working the lure properly like I normally do, but I'm not yielding results. So in those situations, you have to be different. You have to adapt, whether it's throwing different profile size lures, whether it's working at a different speed. For me, blind casting way, way, way far away from the fish to where they don't even know that I'm there ended up getting me a couple strikes, all of which I missed. but that's, there's different tactics you can implement. And that's kind of what we want to build off of today. I mean, that was my lesson learned, was instead of being adamant about sight fishing, I should have hung back a little bit, stakeout pulled, and just methodically cast it across that flat that I know these fish are holed up in, but they might not have been willing to play if I was, 15 feet on top of them.
Yep. And Luke, that day that you referenced, remember that first redfish that I caught in that school? That was when we were way far back, and I just launched it, had the wind going with me, and couldn't see it. I didn't get to sight cast it. And all the ones that we were sitting right there, and it was just like textbook sight casting opportunities, and they wouldn't touch it. And sometimes you can feel your line running, like they run into it, and all of a sudden now the whole school is just way off. And you got to come back 20, 30 minutes later. That was a frustrating day, seeing that many redfish in that one spot.
Yeah, like Luke, I really kind of liked your, approach of also making your braid thinner. One thing that I've really been noticing, especially over this last month, as it's getting colder, almost 95% of the fish I'm catching are catching that lure on the drop. So you got to think, whenever you've got tension on the line, that's actually creating small vibrations in the water. And just like what you were saying, I mean, I really think those fish are just very, very sensitive. And the bigger that braid or, line you've got, they're going to be able to feel it more. And I use 15-pound a lot. This year, I really go down to 10 and sometimes even 8. And I've really been catching a lot more fish by doing that. 80% of the year, I'll use, 20, 25, even 30-pound mono in some cases, with no problem, especially around Jacksonville or some of these areas with some dirtier water. But, this time of year, especially trout that are suspended down deep, and then redfish that are in a foot and a half of water, it really makes a difference.
Yeah, and I'll just speak on line diameter too. This is one thing I've been doing, and I've been kind of just testing out with it's called the Dirty Deech rig. And it's just a way to minimize the diameter of your line while still having the business end being abrasion resistant. So like for snook, for instance, this is what I caught. It was about a 30-inch snook, and it was a East Coast big old fat snook, really strong, and it was with 5-pound braid that had then they said this exact rig. And then it had a 15-pound leader, but it was tipped with a 30-pound leader. So it's basically just beefed up the business end on a leader that otherwise wouldn't be strong enough for a big snook, because they can just chew through lines so well. So again, still kind of new to it, but the fact that this has been working so well, I have to imagine that this thinner diameter has actually been a pretty big impact. How big, I don't know, but we just wanted to kind of start the conversation just so you're thinking about minimizing your line diameter and even the vibration in the water of your lures. Both of which on a calm, clear day can significantly decrease your odds of getting these finicky fish to strike.
So Wyatt, you've been quiet over there.
Oh, I've just been loving hearing Luke talk about how a thinner line diameter might be contributing to more fish. Because we did a leader podcast, I want to say like a year ago, and me and Justin talked about downsizing leader for trout. And I think we got laughed at a little bit, but now it's what I've never done is downsize the full main line, which probably actually has more of an effect because there's more line in the water. But I mean, when I was fishing in North Carolina, I learned it from the guides around there. You downsize that leader, 12 is the heaviest you go when you're fishing for trout in the wintertime. And 6 pound test was pretty average over there for your leader, but they tie much longer leaders, so it's a little bit different. Average leaders we tie, I would say, probably is maybe half the length of a rod, 2-3 feet. So a little bit different approach, but I love the idea of downsizing mainline to decrease that diameter, especially in the wintertime when that water is cold. It seems like vibration travels more in colder water because I guess it's denser. I don't know the exact science behind it, but even just comparing the sink rate of suspending plugs, which I know we're going to talk about later for finicky fish, those plugs sink at a slower rate. It tells you the water's a little bit denser. So those vibrations are traveling those fish can feel so much more. And in addition, they're much more lethargic. They're just more aware of what's going on. So it's like, this is the time of year you really got to get stealthy and you really have to play your cards right. But it's tough because you get into these amazing sight fishing scenarios where the water's really clear and you're up close on fish. But in reality, the fish that you're seeing are probably already way too close for you to catch. Not to say that you can't catch them, but the fish that's furthest away from you is the one that's easiest to catch in the wintertime. Stealth is of utmost importance. And even Justin, when I was fishing with you, just as it started to get cold a couple months ago, the one big red that we were seeing, I mean, I don't even know how many big redfish we saw, but the one that we were able to get to eat, at least that I was able to get to eat, was that red that was in a pothole. I could only see the pothole. I could not see fish. It was so far away to bomb a cast out to it. But and just like Joe was talking about, the ones that are furthest away, those are the ones you have the best chance of catching.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, man. That was it right there. Is we would see them and we couldn't get a single one to eat. And the one that we didn't see, we got to eat. So it's like, it kind of goes back to the whole, like, you won't know until you cast deal. And I could be better at that. I'm just stubborn. Like, you pulled it off. It was a cool trip.
I had the same thing happen over the holidays. We went up to Georgia to the old farmhouse, and I brought a couple of my saltwater rods. You don't have to really overthink it too much. It's basically a private pond that no one fishes except for me once or twice a year. So it's kind of easy. And I had 30-pound mono rigged up on it just from some saltwater fishing. And I was going to change it, but I went down to the Tahoe. We only drove one car, obviously. My wife had already gone to Kroger to get groceries. So I was like, and that's where all my tackle was. Like, all right, I'll just use this. And this is very clear. Like, there's no pollution. No one's running engines in this little pond/lake. You can see the bottom. I can see the fish. And I'm making cast after cast. I can see these suckers. They're staring at it. I had that 30-pound mono leader on there. So still have my 10-pound braid, 30-pound mono. I finally got one. I finally got one sucker, one little bass. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Because I was like, these are like should be the easiest bass in the world. And usually they are. So next trip, same next day, same everything else for the most part, except I went down to 20. So I used 20-pound mono, and all of a sudden I caught 10. I mean, some of you guys saw the pictures. It was just like easy. Kids are catching them. It was night and day, just going from 30 to 20. And I've seen a lot of people, even in our own community, maybe they're new, maybe they haven't watched all our videos yet, that they just got the brand new Daiwa, BGMQ or whatever they got, their Saltiste, and they got their new reel for Christmas, and they're rigging it up, and guess what they're putting on there on the main line? They're putting 20, right? If you guys have seen a couple days, and they're like, no, like maybe try 10, maybe try 15, because I know for some people it's maybe culture shock to go from 20 to 10 if that's what you're used to, but just try it out. I don't suggest you go to 5 yet. To me, that's even a little bit crazy, but start with 10. All the fish that you see, everyone here catching for the most part is on 10-pound braid. And that includes some really mondo fish like overslot red, snook. I mean, even some tarpon. I mean, big fish caught on just 10-pound braid. And Luke's, Dirty Deeks rig. You can do a lot of damage on that, and it makes a difference. I mean, I saw it with fish I could literally see in crystal clear lake water. It was shocking what a difference that made. And in the scheme of things, like if you looked at it, right, like a 20-pound mono versus 30-pound mono, same brand, it's not that much different, right? I mean, in the big scheme of things, like a newbie probably couldn't even tell the difference. They could maybe guess, but it's not like looking at a size 14 shoe versus a 6 shoe. It's not that different. And yet it made all the difference in the world.
Yeah, it's important. And yeah, main line and leader line, both. I think the theory should be just to go with the thinnest and lightest line that you can get away with for the fish you're targeting, right? You don't want to be irresponsible and have it to where you're breaking off on a lot of your hookups. That's obviously not good. But the way to prevent that is just do that dirty deeks trick where you just really maximize that last 5 inches, because that's where most of the abrasion is going to happen. Other than that, it's really just a pull test. And even this light braid, I haven't tested the 5 pound yet, but 10-pound braid with a good knot, it's like with the FG knot, a 10-pound braid to a 30-pound leader, I've literally had the break points go up to 25 pounds. So the braid in particular, the actual breaking point is way higher than the rated amount. So it's one thing that, although it seems like 5 pound line is a terrible idea, I thought it was too until I started using it. I'm going to test this out, but I'll be shocked if it's less than like 12 pounds. And that, again, that's going to be like the same breaking point that a 10-pound mono would have. So a lot of it's just going as light as you feel comfortable with. And if you do that, you just have to pay attention to your knots, practice your knots. Like for braid to leader, the FG knot is shockingly good. Just takes a little bit of practice, and over time you'll find that it's actually super easy to tie. So when you do go light, just put more and more emphasis on your knots is I guess a very important thing, because we do not want to be leaving our lures in fish's mouths. That is not good for anybody.
Richard, what were you saying offline about some of the deep water stuff?
Yeah, so one of the things, really where I'm at, these fish, they can go down to 15, sometimes even 20 feet. I know Wyatt experienced some of that when he was in North Carolina, especially for trout. Redfish, a little different story. We can kind of talk about them later. But, really one of the things that makes me, catch more fish is downsizing my presentation a lot of times, but also decreasing the weight of my jig or weighted hook. And I've even noticed they're getting so picky now, or even the underbelly of a weighted hook, sometimes it's a little bit too much compared to having the main part of the hook and just come out. It's just a little bit smaller of a presentation. And I've been getting a lot of taps and things like that. And when that starts happening, you start trying to figure out, okay, like they're going after it, but they're not committing. So you start messing around and changing things. But one of the things with a lighter jig, especially when you're fishing deep and in current in areas like I am, having that thinner diameter line really, really makes a difference on allowing that lighter jig to get down deep. And like I said, I'm catching some of these fish in 12 or 15 feet, with like a 1/8 ounce jig, because that's really about as much as you can get away with many times. And it makes a huge difference on the sink rate. But if it's too fast and you throw a 1/4 ounce out there, they're not even going to touch it, so you need that presentation that's just going to get you down enough, but it's not moving too fast and have too much weight on it. So that's been something that's been really, really effective with me lately, is doing that. And also having a longer leader line has been, effective, because you're essentially, a little bit fishing in a vacuum. You don't know exactly where those fish are. You can mark them, but you don't know. It's very difficult to know exactly where your lure is kind of in that huge water column of 15 feet, and like I said, many times I'm letting it just completely fall. And then as soon as I come tight, I've got a fish. But if I'm, letting it fall and reeling in, I feel like the vibration, and especially with some of those, thicker lines, like 15-pound braid and stuff, is putting off too much in the water, and I won't even get a bite. And it's not that the fish aren't there. I can see them and mark them, so it kind of makes you just think a little bit of what can you do. And that's what's been working here for sure.
What about, you mentioned a lot of times that you're not really even retrieving, it's happening on the drop. Are you guys changing up your retrieval speed? A lot of times, let's just take winter. I know like the bass guys out here, you watch them and they're going almost to the point they're not moving when they're using their little Ned rigs and just worms off the bottom. What's your tips there for when the fish are finicky? Are you slowing it down? Are you speeding it up? Are you doing something crazy?
So I'll take the lead on this one. I know that everyone's going to have a different answer here, but when I've been going out sight fishing and I can see that the fish are spooky, my retrieve is about putting it on the dinner plate for these fish, because we think wintertime, they don't have a lot of energy. Any serious movement they make to chase down prey consumes calories that they may not be able to find later in the day or the next day. Their biology is going to dictate to them only take opportunities to feed that are going to cost, minimal amounts of energy. So they're conserving what they can. So putting that lure close to these fish is important, but what you really got to do when you get close to them is, slow it down. So you see a fish, you throw it out, you speed it up to make sure that path of retrieval intercepts it where it's naturally going to go. You don't want to end up too far in front of the fish. You definitely don't want to roll over its back. It's not going to change its path of motion to attack that lure. 90% of the time, it's right after it rolls by its nose that it turns and goes after it, not before. Like, very rarely do I have fish hit before that lure passes in front of their face. Once it's passed, then they make the movement. They attack from the tail. Very rarely do they attack head on. It's just easier for that bait fish to get away, and then they got to turn around and look for it. If it darts away from the back, it's just more advantageous. So you're speeding up. As soon as it gets within about a foot of that fish, what I'll do is I'll usually give it 2 hops. I do that for 2 reasons. Number one, in the wintertime, most of the prey is a crustacean. Most of it is shrimp. And I'm using real small paddle tails that can look like an injured bait fish or a cold stun bait fish. But most of the time, I think predators are chasing shrimp. Like, just the other day, I have an insider report that's going live this week. I heard a redfish blow up on something, and it was a shrimp skipping along the surface. Cast it over there, 2 twitches. I watched the redfish come up and eat my paddle tail after those twitches. So number one, I do the twitches so that I get the crustacean profile. Number 2, it allows for a drop in front of that fish, which is the easiest pounce. So right after it passes by, those 2 twitches put it in front of its face. It goes down. That drop is when I catch most of my fish, both redfish and trout. I've never really sight casted a flounder, but if you watch any of my videos that I've done on how to retrieve for flounder, the only way I retrieve for them is twitch pause. That drop, there's something about a drop from a lure that really, really triggers a bite. So that's like my go-to retrieval for spooky fish, is twitch pause. But I mean, the only exception to that would be redfish that are traveling in a large school. A lot of times I just try to swim it by them without stopping it. And there's a group effect that makes them really, really competitive for food in the wintertime. And it seems like if you stop it, they all of them get to look at it and they realize something's up. Like, a large school is not used to seeing baits just stop. But one single fish, twitch pause, it's like I can a lot of times convince those fish to bite during that moment.
Yeah, and the more finicky, I almost think the smaller you need to go. And I think why I nailed it too is if you do a straight retrieve, they're just not going to chase it down. And another reason, on top of just not being able to have as much food, is that the wintertime their metabolism slows down, so they really don't. Sometimes they're just not very hungry, and they're just trying to warm up in the sun, and they just don't want to be bothered. And but if you get a really slow retrieve, like White said, right on the dinner plate, and you keep it there for a little bit, like they're just instinct will eventually be, okay, like, it's easy meal. I don't have to consume much energy. Let me just go ahead and eat it. And so when they're finicky, you have to get right in their face and give some sort of unique retrieve to trigger the bite, because they're not going to chase down. In most cases, they're not going to chase down just a constantly retrieve lure. When they're finicky, they're really going to need that little bit of a razzle dazzle, if you will, to really just trigger, like, okay, like, here's an easy meal. I'm gonna go ahead and, like, I just had a snook and a report that's going live in a couple of days that I saw. I made 3 casts to it, one of which it turned away from, and so I thought I had no chance. Then the wind was pushing me back, so I turned the troll motor on to get me back in position. I saw it flinch when I turned the troll motor on, so I was just, okay, I have no chance of this fish. But I was like, one more cast, and I swam it right in front of it. It was literally the same rig, this little Slam Shady 2.0 paddle tail, and I stopped it right in its face. I watched it. He was looking at it, and I gave like 2 tiny twitches, like very tiny, like barely, like might have just barely shimmied it, and that thing just pounced it. And it wouldn't have done it. It clearly turned me down multiple times. It knew there was some danger in the area, but it just, with like some little unique retrieve, even though they know they shouldn't eat it, they just can't help it. And
Razzle dazzle.
yeah, the old razzle dazzle. And it's surprisingly effective. Joe, you mentioned that too. Like it actually happened a day after you were telling about those bass.
Oh, you use my bass tip.
Yeah, he was using a Ned rig, watching those bass in clear water.
That was it was the power prawn. Because I was using Wyatt. These are the bass. I'm watching them, and I could see them. I see where they're schooling, and I'm doing slow pops with it was the Power Prawn Junior, slightly smaller, and they literally just watch it go by. But they were curious about it. So the next time I let it do one pop because it was in mud bottom. It was right where the sun's shining. They're all kind of sunning in there. And that one little pop off the bottom kind of made it look a little ploof with the mud. And then they're now one of them's kind of coming up staring at it like they're doing before. And I literally, I guess it was left hand, I'm taking that rod tip. You've seen some of the pro bass guys do it on tour. They're so good. And they sit there and just barely shake that rod tip where it's giving just enough vibration. And all of a sudden that thing just nailed it. And it worked multiple times where I'm catching bass on the Power Prawn Junior in a public lake. But when I was doing my normal, what I would use, like, in let's just say the fall for snook at a dock, they wouldn't even touch it. But it was something weird. And I called Luke, and that's cool that I didn't know you used it for snook. But man, it was wild to see that in action, and it worked almost every time. If I could get that thing just shaking on the bottom, they couldn't resist it. It was crazy. Well, razzle dazzle, pop pile. Who's next? You come on, you guys. Radio silence here. You guys are that.
I have a lot of thoughts. Like I want to be on the coattails with this, but I kind of want to throw a curveball to you guys because I can't help but think about that last situation. I lose sleep over not getting fish that I can see. Like it's a problem. And in all the tournaments that I've done, if you ever are in a tournament and money's on the line and times are the essence, every decision you make in that moment is like, it's really heavy. And I keep looking back and saying, man, what could I have done? Should I have blind casted from a distance? Should I have razzle dazzled? Because that has worked. Like I got a friend that's won tournaments doing that with DOA shrimp and a little bit of gold flake and just like, on the flats. But the curveball is we're never supposed to leave fish to find fish, right? Luke, you spent some time with that snook and you got him to eat. Are there ever times where you've been casting at the same general area where there's fish and you spooked him 2 or 3 times and they're still kind of in the area? Maybe half of them have moved off. Are you going to beat up those fish, or are you going to say, I'm going to go take everything I've learned in that moment? I still got about 2-3 hours of fishing, and I'm going to try to go find different fish that I haven't botched.
That's a good question. I'll give it 5-10 minutes and just slow down, right? Like just like where you guys are saying, where even though you can't see them, they're in the area, just do the old fan cast and just, you can't do a total razzle dazzle because that'll take like 10 minutes to reel in one retrieve, but just to slow down and do some slow hops. And I like going to the like the leprechauns, like something like that doesn't have a paddle tail, that's really just a twitch bait that you can just slowly bounce along the bottom. And because again, those, all it takes is just one lucky drop in front of the fish's face, and you do a quick little, short little hop, and they'll pounce on it. So yes, I'll give it some time. What I won't do is I won't spend like an hour there. Like I've had I've seen some emails coming from clients that are fishing for like 7 hours and really aren't catching anything, and they just went to like 2 spots in 7 hours. Like, no, I'll give it. My patience totally goes away after like 10 minutes of no action, and I'll go on to the next spot.
I'd have to agree with that for sure. And it's funny, I'll actually take it on a fish by fish basis. Like if I'm in an area, I've been on a really good redfish bite on the flat that I fish, and there's, they're spread out. They're not in like a school where they're packed tight shoulder to shoulder. There's groups of triples and doubles and whatnot. And a lot of times if I roll that lure in front of a fish and it either spooks, and sometimes I'll get it on the dinner plate. It's not every time that fish will commit. It'll come, it'll change its speed, and I botch it'll roll over its back, it'll spook off. It'll see my shadow as I twitch, something. If that fish spooks, I don't care about it anymore. I can maybe count on one hand the amount of fish that I have caught after spooking. And it's like, it's usually 5-10 minutes afterwards. That's so much time. A lot of times I'm drifting or I'm on my slowest mode on my trolling motor, and I'll just go on, look for the next fish. I'm constantly looking for the next fish or the next group. I don't like messing with fish more that I've already said no to me, because chances are the reason that fish didn't hit when it went by is not hungry. It's already fed. Most of the time, sight fishing is going to occur for us middle of the day, not mid-morning in the winter when that's like they're really feeding. The sun's not high enough yet for us to really see them. So it's like chances are those fish have already fed, and you're kind of just having to go for the fish that maybe didn't find a meal that morning. It's really a numbers game. Even when you're not sight fishing, it's always a numbers game. You're constantly throwing, working your lure like there's a fish you're looking at in front of it. You never know when that one's going to be the cast that lure happens to pass by a fish. Always think of it as a numbers game, and I play the numbers. I just keep rolling. I keep going. If I keep sitting there and messing with fish that have already given me data that they're not willing to eat, I don't want to mess with them anymore. So I will always go to the next spot. I will leave fish to find fish if the fish I've found aren't feeding.
And you can always come back to them 30 minutes, exactly. An hour later.
Exactly. And that maybe they'll start feeding again then. So it's like right then and there, they've given you what you need to know. I agree with that. And I've definitely left fish, not found anything in a new spot, came back a couple hours later. It's a different part of the tide, different time of day, and their behavior has changed. They're cooperating almost every other cast. You never know, but like they'll tell you what they're doing right then and there. And it's great when you get to sight fish them and watch them, but I'll leave them to go find different ones if possible.
Just like dating, right? Like I'm at home now and the whole family's sick, so I can't say that. Just
it's a numbers game. Yeah, numbers game. With everything. But it could be like a dolphin. A dolphin could have just swam through and just wrecked house and just have everything on alert. So you never know. But yeah, as why I said, yeah, if they're clearly not cooperating, then something's wrong. Either it's being a little bit too loud going in, which is time to still leave because they're all spooked, and just be more cautious on the next one. Or sometimes they're just dolphin or somebody just fished them. Like there's a lot of variables.
All right, we're on podcast 370. I've gotten a pretty good idea of what kind of questions that people ask, and I already know that someone is going to ask in the comments, if we don't address this, do you think the color of your line, your braid, whatever, has any impact on finicky fish? I know it's going to come up.
I don't think so.
Okay.
As long as you're using a leader, right? As long as you're using at least like a 1.5 foot leader, ideally clear, it seems like the braid doesn't matter. I've used yellow, I've used bright yellow, I've used white, I'm having green now, and it all seems to work. I was afraid of yellow at first, thinking that would be a terrible idea, and it was shockingly good.
No, yeah, you've outfished me numerous times with yellow, so no, like color does not matter. Like I am a gray guy just because it looks pretty. If you choose colors of braid, we had a whole podcast about it. Do it because you like the color. They make pinks, they make aqua camo, they make whites, they make whatever. Just choose something that you enjoy. Some people use color for a visual reference, and it's better for them because they can see it. So you can, follow your line when you're working your lure, and that helps certain anglers. For me, I choose gray. I think it's stealthy, but that's not really why I chose it. I chose it because I have a lot of metallic on the BGMQ, and I like to be matchy-matchy. And I give no shame in saying that. Like, it's 2022. I got the choices. I'm going to choose to look pretty.
I like to sport my braid.
Yeah, sporting it hard.
Oh, that's awesome. Let's talk about live bait. Shrimp is probably going to be if we're talking winter here. What do you guys think? 'Cause sometimes I do want to tell, especially some newer people that are struggling, first time using lures, and regardless of anything else, it's just tough on them. And sometimes you want to say, man, just get some shrimp and let it soak down there. What do you guys think? All else fails?
Could not agree more. Dead ones will work fine, but they can look at rigs too now that the water is clear. I say a free line live shrimp. Live bait is a little bit more difficult to manage. Yeah. But if you've got a little aerator bucket or you got a live well on your boat, free line live shrimp on a flat, in a pothole, on the edge of a channel where there's some trout or a point. That is so tough to beat that. But less terminal tackle right now, the better, I think.
Yeah. And over here on the East Coast, the trout here, a lot of times we don't have those big shrimp like we did. A lot of them have moved. They will still hit shrimp a lot of times, but sometimes finger mullet or a mud minnow can be a little bit more effective for trout specifically. The reds will always just about hit shrimp, but every once in a while the trout will get a little finicky because they're like, I haven't seen one of you guys in a while. It's kind of weird, but you throw a mud minnow out there or a finger mullet especially, and they'll nail it.
There used to be times when I started that I would try to sight fish with live shrimp. Now I'm doing everything with artificial. And when I'd find a tailing redfish or a slow head wake of a redfish, I could pitch a live shrimp in front of them and get them. But, for the sight fishing aspect using live shrimp, you can't present it as well. I mean, there's more opportunities where fish are laying on the edge of a pothole, or you can see them at any depth, and you can't really move that shrimp in a way where it's going to sink the way you want it or move in the same straight path that you would have with like a jerk shad or a paddle tail. So for sight fishing, I have been successful with it. There's times that if you can get a shrimp right in front of a red, it's probably going to eat it. But I have more challenges of getting that live bait presented in front of it naturally to give it the opportunity to eat. So if I'm going to use live bait, I agree with the guys. Like, two scenarios, potholes is great. I mean, for the most part, everybody everywhere should have a pothole or should have an area next to a piece of structure. Let's say like an oyster, for example, one on a float and then one on bottom with like a little pinch weight or a light jig head. Absolutely. Like you're going to get bit, you're going to get tight lines, and it could be a really quality fish. It could be a 15-inch trout. Regardless, your chances are going to be better if you have those two scenarios. And why it's right. Less terminal tackle, the better. We're already talking about spooky fish. Might as well refine exactly how you're going to go about doing it.
Yeah, and for sight fishing too, another problem with doing live bait is that first of all, you need to lighten down the weight, like was just mentioned. And when you do that, you really can't cast it very far. So lures actually have a very big advantage for casting distance. And we've already covered before, right? The further away the fish is, the less likely it knows that danger is in the area, and the more likely you are to fish it. So for sight fishing in particular, I agree with Justin that artificial lures have a pretty good advantage based on castability and just the fact that you can just present it better. So you don't know exactly what's going to happen with that shrimp when it hits the water. Also, pinfish, there could be a little pinfish down there that just totally wrecks it before the redfish gets to it. So a lot more things can go wrong with shrimp if you're doing the actual sight fishing, which is more technical, although more rewarding, I would say. But I really do think that lures have the advantage for those who are specifically looking to sight fish.
And gives you the control with finicky fish. Cool. What else? What else you guys got? Any other species specific tips that you found to work?
We mentioned this earlier, just even just tackle selection, like what lures factor in well to those, slower presentations that we're going to give. And I promised we would talk about it, but I mean, we would be so wrong to not talk about spooky fish and mirror lures. I mean, especially where Richard's at, this is like the staple of winter trout fishing, is getting a suspending plug, whether it's Mirrodine, MR52, Twitch and mullet, Twitch and minnow, like Richard's got. Like, there are a lot of different hard baits that you can use that suspend, or there's, some of the Paul Brown fat boys that are not technically a hard bait, but they serve the same purpose, suspending plug. And these are great for specifically trout. I wouldn't say that, I know some people go after redfish with them, but I think they're really, they're something I take out when I'm really targeting trout. They're great because they suspend mid-column. Like I said, having a lure that doesn't move a lot that you can put in front of a fish, you're working these Paul Browns almost like top waters underwater to get the attention, and then you don't touch it for like 5 seconds. It just sits there and it slowly sinks. And a lot of times, if you've watched any of Luke's underwater footage, which he's gotten some seriously great footage of trout kind of stalk. And in the wintertime, if they do choose to stalk something, they're going to stalk it slow. They're not going to chase it down really fast. So those slow walks with a suspending plug, twitch, 1 or 2, or if you get those Paul Browns, it's a kind of a slow walk the dog, and then you stop it and it starts sinking down to that strike zone. man, those trout hammer it. And I know that when I would fish for trout in the Carolinas, you end up in some of those holes Richard was talking about, where you literally throw that mirrodine up current and it sinks with the current, and the current brings it where the fish are. And you maybe twitch it once or twice throughout that retrieve, and you're not even actually retrieving, you're just picking up line. It's a very finesse style of fishing. It's not I think the best lure to use in terms of numbers, but there are days where those fish are so finicky and picky, and like you'll see them spooking off if you're in shallow flats. If you're in the creeks, it's a little bit harder to see it happening, but you'll know if you're not getting bites in an area that you're marking fish. They can be game changers on certain days. So I'm not saying they're the best lure or a very easy thing to do. It's not an easy presentation to give. Definitely not something I would recommend to a beginner to do, but it can have its day. Suspending plugs are still a big thing for a reason. So it's a lure you're going to want to have in your tackle box. I think, what do we have on the shop? We've got the Rapala Twitch and Mullet. We've got the Paul Brown Fat Boy. We got mirrodines. There's a lot of different options out there. It's just, matching what bait you have in your area. But the action of a suspending bait fish is really, it's so killer. I can't recommend it enough if you find yourself on a really tough bite.
Yeah, that Paul Brown, it looks like a hard bait, but it doesn't identify as a hard bait. So make sure not to offend it. Although you can call it a fat boy, and it does not get offended by that at all. So,
oh my gosh. I was going to piggyback. Now I can't piggyback on that. That was too good.
Sure you can.
So suspending baits in general, if would you guys agree that you ever been in a situation where there's good reds and good trout in an area, and there's a lure that we have available only through a certain channel right now that I can't wait to get my hands on, and it's a Slam Shady jerk shad, where hello, Joe, it's okay. What is it? Oh, he got it. Okay, right there. So there have been instances where there's specific flats that I know, like Mondo 27-inch, 30-inch trout are hanging out on, and a weightless, like a Gamakatsu extra wide gap weightless worm hook, just like an owner twist lock, but it doesn't have the twist lock, doesn't have the weight on it. There's no weight, and just a suspending soft plastic jerk shad in Slam Shady color, slowly dancing across the flats, Wyatt, like what you're talking about. There we go. It's suspended. It's going to land very quietly. It still is like a pretty easy meal opportunity, but in those situations, I can work them over grass. I can work them in really shallow water, where even with single inline replacements on a suspending hard bait, I might still snag grass sometimes with like a Paul Brown Fat Boy or any other suspending twitch bait, like a hard bait. And in those cases, a soft plastic jerk shad, whether it's Alabama Leprechaun or it's that Slam Shady jerk shad that I am like looking forward to getting and trying, that's going to be in my back pocket. That's what I'm looking to throw in the cold months, particularly for big trout. I think that's going to be a winner, just based on previous years of doing, styles like that with different colors and size profiles of lures. I think that's going to be a winner.
One thing that, just for anybody that still has the Z-Man ones, though, a weightless hook probably wouldn't. Yeah, it would have to be like the TP, not the Z-Man one. Because it would
if it were a Z-Man, or if it were like a TP plastic, it's really buoyant, right? And then you kind of need to go to the weight, and then it doesn't really work in the same way. So that's why, like, I'm excited about the Slam Shady jerk shad that we've now got on that 11-1 lure offer. I saw that and I was like, that's going to be killer, because that way I can use it unweighted and it still will sink a little bit. I can get it down below the surface and work that 1 foot zone that big trout will be up in super shallow, but everything you've thrown at them and you spook them. It's like a burger falls out of the sky and they don't like it. So this is just going to land much, much quieter. And I'm really excited about using it.
Yeah, I'm excited to use it for redfish here, because, a lot of times we'll have those kind of like white, like tapeworms, and I think they're going to think that's exactly what it is, and they're going to crush it. I'm really excited about it. Yeah.
Cool. Well, guys, this is helpful. I see we've already talked like 40 minutes on different tactics and ways to prevent spooky fish from spooking off and instead hitting your lure or your shrimp. Any other tips? Any other little other species specific things that you guys have learned over the years and trial and error and days of crying at night, wishing that you had another chance?
I think one last thing. I know I keep coming up with one last thing, but I can talk about spooky fish all day. Get out of the boat and wade. It's the most stealthy way to fish. And I've put out a couple reports recently, and I'd take the boat to a spot to wade. It's not just I'm walking in on a shoreline because I don't feel like taking on the boat. I'm taking the boat to a spot to wade. You get the most out of a shoreline doing it. I think the reports on when I went to Baffin, it was like, it's easy. I said, it'd be easy to blow these fish out on a trolling motor, especially on a calm day. Like I said, that those vibrations travel in cold water really easily. Wading so much stealthier, and you're not high. You're not up really high. The fish have less of a chance of seeing you, and it's much quieter. You're moving so much slower. You have more opportunities to feel out those fish that are lethargic, aren't going to chase stuff down. So as you're moving slowly, I feel like it's like winter is for wading. Like when we have our big meetup in Fort DeSoto, I'm going to be leading the wade line. I'm wading all day long.
Yeah,
yeah.
Go ahead, Joe.
No, that's probably one of the better tips to end on, because we've had people in the boat, and this is something that when you can't teach it, you take it for granted, or you learn it the hard way. But Luke, we've had people on the boat, right? And I look at them as like, are you always this loud? Like kind of being nice, but also kind of wanting to, help them out. And yeah, I'm talking like dropping stuff, like all of that. You might as well just be jumping up and down on the boat. And that's a big reason. There's nothing worse, right, than putting so much time and energy to get to that 90-10 zone, to find an area where you can actually sight cast a fish, and then not to catch it because of something you did, like stomping around or stumbling in the boat or dropping weights in the boat or whatever it is. Or, I've dropped my GoPro and Luke gives me this look like I'm about to kill you. That stuff, man, it just, especially on a calm day, it's just like putting out signals to every fish around that something is wrong in the area, and be on high alert. There's just nothing worse. So stealth is absolutely key. And Wyatt, you nailed it, man. Wade fishing is it's prime time. Talk about doing it like old school Native Americans. Just get out there and you're hunting, right? This is hunting. Be as stealthy as you absolutely can be, especially if they're that spooky.
Yeah, just less is more, right? Less boat, even kayaks, just not just making loud noise, just making any noise or any movement is enough to spook fish. Even casting too hard, where when we get up in a good spot, I'm always with Joe, is like, do not move. We're in our like, do not move your feet at all. We stay in the same spot. Just barely moving the boat is enough to get waves out, and they'll absolutely feel it. So less is more, and White nailed it. Like getting out and wading. When in doubt, get out and wade. It is definitely the best way to sneak up on fish. And if you are using a troll motor, don't use that spot lock thing with the fancy troll motors where your boat's going, you hit that button and there's a big surge. That just is guaranteed to spook everything. So just barely have the troll motor, no big speed changes, and just less everything. Less is more. Super, even smaller lures too. When in doubt, go a little bit smaller, and that'll often have the best results. So It's super frustrating when it doesn't work, but when it does, like, it's the ultimate. I'm like seeing a fish, casting to it, watching it strike is like, it is the ultimate. It is really hard to beat, and so it's worth all the frustration in my mind. It will be frustrating, 100%, but when it all works out, it's the best. It's the ultimate way to catch fish, and now's the time to do it too. Wintertime is the ultimate. The water's the clearest. The fish will move up in the middle of the day to get warm, and it's just like the ultimate time to go out there and have some amazing fish catching.
Yep. And speaking about awesome and seeing other people do it, if you like to see us do it every single week, we've made some big changes to our content calendar here at Salt Strong for 2022. You Insider members are already getting to witness it literally every single day. We now have 6 full-time coaches in all different parts of the Southeast. And every one of them now is going out to fish a new spot every single week and reporting everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, the pre-trip plan, the post-trip analysis, where they caught fish, where they missed fish, right? All the lessons learned. There's nothing like it. And, we used to do quite a bit of it, and we've kind of just done a lot of stuff, and we listen, we put out another survey, and on the water tips. Everyone loves on the water tips. They want to be able to find the fish. And there's just no better way than to see someone actually do it. It's cool to have people like this talking about it. This is the stuff we put out there for free. This is the, if you're listening or watching this is the public stuff we put out there to bring new members in. It has been a great way to just have a conversation and build a relationship with people. But let's face it, I mean, we can talk about this all day long. The real value is seeing someone actually fish a real area, like an area that's in your backyard or something that looks similar, and then talk about everything they learned and why they picked that spot and why the fish were in certain places during that time of the year, that tide cycle, that weather pattern, etc. It's absolutely priceless. So you guys are in for quite a treat this year, and some new lures. I can't say anything else, but got some new lures. Probably the next 45, 50 days, we'll have one, and then we'll have another one a couple months after that. And these are ones that are proprietary, like might even be working on a patent on one this summer. I'll just leave that as is, meaning something that's been completely different, and we own these molds. You will not see these anywhere else, and obviously we'll do our normal Slam Shady colors and some other color patterns as well. But really pumped to get this in your hands. The new Moonwalkers are back. We had an issue with the last batch. Super frustrating when the manufacturer makes some tweaks that we did not necessarily like, but it is what it is. We took full ownership of it, and going to give everyone a freebie or 5 freebies, depending on how many you bought. And so we'll be replacing those. Those should be coming in hopefully sooner than later. So guys, we appreciate you. Love you. Make sure to come join us if you haven't already at saltstrong.com. You'll see a little button to join us in the Insider Club. Us and the now 27,000. I don't even know what number we're at now. Other members. And really cool stuff coming. So, of course, that is where we help you find the fish, help you save money on your tackle, and meet new friends. The private community is quite special, and we just made a lot of changes to that. I mean, a complete facelift. Been really cool. So, appreciate you guys. Stay warm and out of the wind. At least as we're recording this, it's kind of crummy outside, which is why we're all inside, and Wyatt's got a parka on, and I guess Richard, you got a little jacket on too. You guys. Woo-hoo. Justin, you too? What are you wearing? Mock turtleneck?
Blazer? I don't know.
Wearing a scarf for whoever's not watching the podcast.
Khakis? All right, guys. We out. Peace.
Yeah.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was